The garden smelled of wet earth and dying roses. I hadn't meant to find him there. No one had. The Alpha King wasn't supposed to cry, wasn't supposed to be anything less than the granite figure who stood at the head of council meetings, his jaw set like a challenge to the world itself. But there he was, shoulders curved inward, face buried in hands that could break bones with a careless flex. The sound he made was raw, animal, a grief so profound it seemed to hollow out the air around him. I should have turned back, should have slipped away before he sensed me, before I became another witness to his unraveling. But my daughter's hand was already slipping from mine. "Don't cry, sir," Rosie's small voice cut through the evening, clear as a bell. "You can have my mama." The world stopped. Every instinct in me screamed to snatch her back, to cover her mouth, to apologize and disappear into the hedgerows before his grief turned to rage. But the king lifted his head, and the look on his face wasn't anger. It was devastation wearing a man's features, eyes red-rimmed and lost, tracking from my daughter to me with something like wonder breaking through the wreckage. "Rosie," I started, my voice thin, already apologizing. "She's sad too," my daughter continued, undeterred by my horror, by the way my fingers were now digging into her shoulder. "She cries at night when she thinks I'm sleeping. You could both be less sad together." Heat flooded my face. The king stared at me, and I felt naked under that gaze, stripped of every careful wall I'd built since Marcus, since the day I became a widow at 23, left with a daughter and a grief I couldn't name. 3 years had passed. 3 years of learning to smile in daylight and shatter in darkness, of pretending the weight of single motherhood wasn't crushing me vertebra by vertebra. "I'm so sorry, Your Majesty," I managed, the words tumbling over themselves. "She doesn't understand. She's only 6 next month," Rosie corrected, chin lifted with that stubborn pride that was pure Marcus. "And I do understand. Mama says sometimes people need people. That's why she lets Mrs. Kowalski from next door come over for tea even though she talks too much." Under any other circumstance, I might have laughed. Instead, I wanted the earth to open beneath my feet, to swallow me and my precocious daughter before we could embarrass ourselves further. This was the Alpha King, the man who'd lost his mate 6 months ago to a fever that swept through the pack like divine punishment, taking the Luna Queen and leaving him lord over a kingdom that suddenly felt too large, too cold. Everyone knew he'd loved her with the kind of intensity that made other bonds look pale. Everyone knew he was drowning, and my daughter had just offered me up like a consolation prize. "We should go," I said, already backing away, already pulling Rosie with me. "I apologize for the intrusion." "Wait." The command was soft but absolute. I froze. The king rose slowly from the stone bench, unfolding to his full height, easily 6'4", maybe more, with shoulders that seemed to carry the weight of mountains, even in grief. Even with tear tracks still damp on his face, he radiated a power that made my lungs feel too small. "What's your name?" His voice was rough, scraped raw. "Clara," I whispered. "Clara Ashford. And this is—" "Rosie," I heard. Something ghost-like flickered across his expression. Not quite a smile, but the memory of one. He looked at my daughter, and the hardness around his eyes softened fractionally. "You're very kind, little one." "Mama's the kindest," Rosie said with absolute certainty. "She gives her lunch to Mr. Davies, who sits outside the library even though she gets hungry. And she never yells, even when I spill things. And she smells like cinnamon." "Rosie, that's enough. Does she?" The king's gaze swung back to me, and this time there was something sharp beneath the grief, something that made my pulse stutter. He breathed in slowly, deliberately, and I watched his pupils dilate. "Yes, she does." The air between us thickened. I'd grown used to being invisible. The young widow who worked at the PAC's community center, who kept her head down and her daughter close, who'd learned to fold herself into corners at gatherings because unmated females with children occupied an uncomfortable space in PAC hierarchy. Too used to be considered fresh, too burdened to be desirable. But the king was looking at me like I was the first thing he'd truly seen in months. "Your mate," he said quietly. "How long?" 3 years. The words tasted like ash. "Training accident." He was trying to help a younger wolf with shifting techniques, and I swallowed hard. It happened quickly, A lie. It had been agonizing, actually. Marcus had held on for 2 days, his body broken beyond repair, his hand in mine as he made me promise to take care of Rosie, to be strong, to live. I'd promised everything he asked. I'd been lying to myself ever since. The king nodded slowly, understanding written in every line of his frame. We were both haunted houses, walking around pretending our foundations weren't cracked. I come here every evening, he said, gesturing to the garden that sprawled around us. Wild roses and lavender, night-blooming jasmine climbing the walls. She planted most of these. I keep thinking if I sit here long enough I'll feel her again, but it's just me and the ghosts. The honesty of it hit like a fist. I'd spent 3 years having people tell me time heals and you're so strong, and Marcus would want you to move on, empty platitudes that bounced off the armor of my grief without leaving a dent. But this man, this king, was offering me the raw truth. Sometimes the dead don't leave. Sometimes they stay, and you learn to live in a house crowded with absence. I talk to him sometimes, I admitted before I could stop myself. Marcus. Usually when I'm cooking, he always hung around the kitchen, stealing bites before dinner. I'll catch myself setting out 2 plates and then... I trailed off, shaking my head. Rosie thinks I'm talking to myself. I am, Rosie confirmed cheerfully. But that's okay. Mama says everyone has their ways of being sad. Hers is quiet. The king crouched down, bringing himself to Rosie's eye level. It was such an unexpected gesture, this massive, powerful male folding himself small for a child, that something in my chest twisted painfully. Your mama is very wise, he told her, and very brave. It takes courage to keep going when you're sad. Are you brave? Rosie asked with that brutal child honesty that spares no one. He considered this seriously. I'm trying to be. Then maybe Mama can help. She's good at helping. Rosie looked up at me with those wide hazel eyes, so much like her father's. Right, Mama? I didn't know what to say. The situation had spiraled so far beyond my control that I was adrift, watching this strange interaction unfold as if from a distance. The Alpha King, Damian Wolf, ruler of the Crescent Moon Pack, descended from a bloodline so ancient and powerful that even other alphas treaded carefully around him, was kneeling in the dirt before my daughter, asking questions like she held answers he'd lost. A breeze moved through the garden, carrying the scent of jasmine and something else. Something wild and clean, like wind over snow-capped peaks. His scent. It wrapped around me, and I felt my wolf stir for the first time in years, lifting her head with interest that felt almost like betrayal. No, I told her silently. We're not doing this. We really should go, I said more firmly this time. Rosie has school tomorrow and it's past her bedtime. Just 1 more minute, Rosie pleaded. She looked at the king with sudden shyness. Can I ask you something? He nodded. Do you have kids? 'Cause if you do, maybe they're sad too. Maybe Mama and I could come visit, and everyone could be sad together. And then maybe everyone would get less sad. The king's face did something complicated. Pain and longing, and a dozen other emotions I couldn't name flashing across it in rapid succession. No, he said quietly. No children. We wanted them. But there wasn't time. The grief in those words was bottomless. I felt it echo in my own bones, in all the dreams Marcus and I had carried about giving Rosie siblings, about growing old together in a house full of noise and love. All the futures that died with our mates, leaving us with the hollowed-out present. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it with every fractured piece of myself. He rose slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. Up close, I could see they weren't just dark. They were black with threads of gold running through them, like a night sky shot through with distant fire. There was something magnetic about him, something that went beyond his position or his power. It was the pull of recognition, one broken thing sensing another. Don't apologize, he said. Your daughter... He glanced at Rosie, and that ghost smile flickered again. She's the first person in months who's spoken to me like I'm a person instead of a title. It's refreshing. She has no filter, I said, trying for lightness and landing somewhere near exhaustion. Thank God for that. He held my gaze a moment longer, and I felt something shift in the air between us. Not attraction exactly, not yet, but possibility. The first crack in the walls we'd both built around ourselves. Clara Ashford. I'll remember that name. It sounded like a promise. It sounded like a threat. I took Rosie's hand and backed away, mumbling another apology, another goodbye. But as we left the garden and its broken king behind, I felt his eyes on us the whole way, heavy as a touch. That night, long after I'd tucked Rosie into bed, I stood at my bedroom window and stared out at the distant palace, its towers dark against the darker sky. Somewhere in there, the Alpha King was alone with his ghosts. And somewhere in here, I was alone with mine. But for the first time in 3 years, the loneliness felt different. Not smaller, never smaller, but shared. Like somewhere between the garden and the goodbye, a bridge had been built between two islands, fragile and new. My wolf stirred again, restless beneath my skin, and I pressed my palm flat against the cool glass. Don't, I warned her, don't hope. But it was too late. Hope, I was learning, doesn't ask permission. It simply grows in the cracks, stubborn and wild, whether you want it to or not. The knock came 3 days later, just as I was elbow-deep in flour. I'd been making bread, therapeutic, mindless work that kept my hands busy and my thoughts from spiraling. Rosie was at school. The house was quiet, and I'd almost convinced myself that the garden encounter had been a fever dream, something my lonely brain had conjured to add color to the grayscale of my existence. Then someone knocked, and the world tilted. Through the window, I could see a figure on my porch, tall, broad-shouldered, definitely male. My heart did something acrobatic in my chest as I wiped my hands on my apron and approached the door, every instinct screaming that this was important, that opening this door would change something fundamental. It wasn't the king. The man on my porch was younger, maybe early 30s, with auburn hair pulled back in a knot, and eyes the color of amber. He wore the formal attire of the King's Guard, black uniform with silver threading, the crescent moon insignia embroidered over his heart. When he saw me, he bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that made me deeply uncomfortable. Clara Ashford? His voice was warm, tinged with something like amusement. Yes? I clutched the doorframe, suddenly aware of the flour dusting my arms, the mess of my hair twisted up in a haphazard bun. I'm Julian Cortez, head of the King's Guard. His Majesty requests your presence at the palace this evening, 7 o'clock, if you're amenable. The words hit like stones. I'm sorry, what? It's not a command, Julian added quickly, reading the panic that must have been written all over my face. The king was very specific about that. He's asking, not ordering. He'd like to speak with you if you're willing. Dinner, actually. Something informal. Dinner. With the Alpha King. My mind went completely blank. I have a daughter. I can't just... Childcare can be arranged, if that's the concern. Or she's welcome to come, if you'd prefer. The king mentioned she was memorable. Julian's mouth quirked into a half-smile. His words, not mine. Though between us, I've never seen him smile the way he did when he talked about her. Or you. Heat flooded my face. I don't understand. Why would he want to see me? Julian's expression softened. I think you do, Mrs. Ashford. And I think you're afraid of what it means. But for what it's worth, I've served Damien, His Majesty, for 15 years. I've never seen him this alive since the Luna passed. Whatever happened in that garden, it mattered. The use of the king's given name was deliberate, intimate, a reminder that beneath the crown was a man, complicated and grieving, and apparently reaching out in the only way he knew how. I need to think, I heard myself say. Of course. Julian pulled a card from his pocket, pressed it into my hand. My number. Call any time before 6 if you decide to come, or if you decide not to. Either way, no judgment. But Clara? He waited until I met his eyes. He's a good man. The best I know. And he's been drowning for months. If you can throw him a rope, well, that would be something. Then he was gone. striding back down my walkway to a sleek black car that whispered money and power, leaving me standing in my doorway with flour-dusted hands and a business card that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I called Mrs. Kowalski. "You're going," my neighbor said firmly, after I'd stammered through an explanation. She was 72, widowed twice, and had the kind of blunt wisdom that came from surviving enough heartbreak to fill a library. "And I'm watching Rosie. No arguments." "I don't even know what to wear," I protested weakly. "I can't. This is insane. He's the Alpha King. I'm nobody." "You're a woman who lost her mate and kept breathing. That makes you stronger than most of the titled idiots at that palace." Mrs. Kowalski's voice crackled with conviction through the phone. "And from what you told me about that garden, he saw that. He saw you, Clara. When's the last time anyone did that?" I didn't have an answer. Couldn't find one past the lump in my throat. "Wear the blue dress," she continued. "The one Marcus bought you for your anniversary. The one you've never worn because you were saving it for something special. Well, this is special. This is you deciding to live again." After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen for a long time, staring at nothing. The bread dough had risen too much, would be ruined if I baked it now. Somehow, it felt like a metaphor. At 6:30, I called Julian. "I'll be there," I said before I could change my mind. "Just me. Rosie's with a neighbor." "Excellent." I could hear the smile in his voice. "A car will collect you at 6:45. And Clara, breathe. You're going to be fine." The dress fit like a memory. Midnight blue. The fabric some kind of silk blend that moved like water. The neckline modest but elegant, showing the curve of my collarbones. Marcus had bought it 2 months before he died, insisting I needed something beautiful, something that matched my eyes. I'd hung it in the back of my closet and tried not to look at it because looking meant remembering, and remembering meant drowning. But tonight, I pulled it on. And when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a ghost. I saw a woman. Thin, yes, worn down by grief and single parenthood and the endless effort of surviving, but still here, still standing. My blonde hair fell in waves past my shoulders, and I left it down, applied minimal makeup, told myself this wasn't a date, wasn't anything but a conversation between two people who understood loss. I almost believed it. The car was exactly on time, driven by a silent wolf in guard uniform who held the door open with professional courtesy and didn't ask questions. The drive to the palace took 20 minutes, winding through the pack's territory as evening settled like a blanket, turning everything soft and golden. I watched the landscape shift from residential streets to the formal grounds surrounding the palace. Acres of manicured gardens and ancient oak trees, the building itself a sprawling stone structure that managed to be both intimidating and beautiful. Julian met me at the entrance. "You look lovely," he said. And it didn't sound like flattery, just fact. He offered his arm, which I took gratefully because my legs felt like water. "He's in the private dining room, small, comfortable. I promise this isn't some formal nightmare with 12 forks and a fish course." That's oddly specific reassurance. I've lived through enough state dinners to know their torture. He guided me through halls that smelled of beeswax and old wood, past portraits of kings and queens dating back centuries, their painted eyes watching our progress. Damien hates them too. All the performance, none of the substance. Tonight's different. Tonight's real. We stopped before an oak door carved with wolves mid-hunt. Julian knocked twice, then pushed it open without waiting for response. "Your Majesty, Mrs. Ashford." Then he was gone, and I was alone with the Alpha King. The room was indeed small, intimate in a way that made my breath catch. A single table set for two. Candles burning low. Windows looking out over the garden where we'd met. And standing by those windows, backlit by the dying sun, was Damien Wolfe. He'd changed from the broken man in the garden. Still grief-worn, still carrying that weight in his shoulders, but now dressed simply in dark pants and a white shirt rolled to his elbows. Looking less like a king, and more like a man trying very hard to seem approachable. When he turned and saw me, something flashed across his face. Surprise, appreciation, something deeper that made my stomach flip. "Clara." My name in his voice sounded like prayer. "You came. You asked, I said, then immediately felt stupid for such an obvious response. I did. I wasn't sure you would. He moved toward me slowly, like I might bolt. Thank you. For taking a chance on this. On me. I'm not sure what this is, I admitted. Honestly? Neither am I. He gestured to the table, and I moved toward it on legs that barely supported me, let him pull out my chair like I was someone precious. I haven't done this in, I don't know, years. Centuries, maybe. I don't know how to do this without her. The honesty was startling. I watched him take his own seat across from me, watched the candlelight play across features that were striking without being classically handsome, a strong jaw, a nose that had been broken at least once. Those extraordinary gold-threaded eyes that seemed to see through every defense I owned. Then maybe we're both figuring it out, I offered quietly. Something in him relaxed. Tell me about Rosie. She's a hurricane in human form, I finished, unable to stop the smile. She has no fear, no filter, no concept of social hierarchy. Marcus used to say she came out arguing with the doctor. I believe it. She takes after her mother then. I blinked. I'm the least argumentative person I know. You walked away from me in the garden. Most people can't do that. He poured wine, something deep and red, into both our glasses. You weren't afraid of me, or you were, but you pushed through it. That takes a kind of strength most people don't have. I was terrified, I confessed. Good. So was I. He raised his glass slightly. To being terrified together? I clinked my glass against his and we drank. And somehow the terror became something else. Anticipation, maybe. Or the first whisper of connection. Dinner arrived in courses brought by silent staff, who appeared and vanished like ghosts. The food was incredible, but I barely tasted it, too focused on the man across from me. On the way he asked questions about my life, about Rosie, about what I did at the community center. He listened like every word mattered, like I was the most fascinating thing in his universe. I teach art to kids, I explained, mostly the ones whose parents can't afford private lessons. It's not glamorous, but it matters. Giving them a space to create, to be messy and imperfect and still make something beautiful. Your daughter said you're kind. I'm starting to see she was right. She also thinks I can fix everything by making soup. Her wisdom has limits. He laughed. Actually laughed. The sound rusty but genuine. And I realized it was probably the first time he'd done that in months. The realization made something warm unfold in my chest. My turn, I said, emboldened by wine and that laugh. Tell me something real. Not king things. Just you. He studied me for a long moment, then leaned back in his chair, the candlelight carving shadows under his cheekbones. I'm angry, he said finally, all the time. At her for leaving. At myself for not being able to save her, at the universe for being cruel enough to give me everything and then rip it away. And I'm tired of people tiptoeing around it, pretending I'm fine when I'm not, when I'll never be fine again. The rawness of it stole my breath. You don't have to be fine, I said. You just have to survive. That's enough. Is it? For you? Some days. I traced the rim of my wine glass. Other days, surviving feels like failing, like I should be more healed by now, more whole. But grief doesn't work on schedules. It just is. Yes. The word came out fierce, relieved. Exactly that. We talked until the candles burned low, until the windows showed only darkness and stars. Talked about loss and anger, and the guilt of laughing when you're supposed to be mourning. Talked about Rosie's fearlessness and Marcus's terrible jokes and the Luna Queen's love of thunderstorms. We built a bridge between us made of honesty and shared pain, and by the time Julian appeared to tell us it was nearly midnight, I'd forgotten to be afraid. Damien walked me to the car himself, his hand a warm presence at the small of my back. Can I see you again? He asked at the door, and there was vulnerability in the question that made him seem younger. I know this is complicated. I know I'm... Yes, I interrupted. Yes, you can. His smile was sunrise breaking. Tomorrow? I could come to you, if the palace is too much. Or we could... The park by the community center, 2:00. Rosie will want to come. Good. I'd like to see her again. He hesitated, then reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind my ear with infinite gentleness. "Thank you, Clara, for tonight. For being terrified with you? Yes, exactly that." I slept that night with something unfamiliar humming through my veins. Not quite happiness. Too soon for that. Too fragile. But maybe it's possibility. The first green shoots breaking through scorched earth, reaching for light. The park was alive with afternoon sun and the laughter of children when we arrived. Rosie had been vibrating with excitement since I told her about our plans, asking 1,000 questions I couldn't answer. Is the king nice? Will he wear a crown? Can I show him my drawing of the dragon? I'd dressed us both carefully, her in her favorite yellow sundress, me in jeans, and a simple green blouse that Marcus used to say brought out my eyes. Casual. Normal. As if we were meeting anyone other than the most powerful wolf in the territory. He was already there, sitting on a bench near the playground, and the sight of him stopped me cold. No guards, no formal attire. Just Damien in jeans and a dark Henley, looking almost ordinary except for the way every wolf within 50 yards had gone still. Heads turned, bodies angled in unconscious submission to the alpha in their midst. But he seemed oblivious to it all, his attention fixed on the playground, watching the children with an expression I couldn't quite read, longing mixed with something like pain. "Mama, look." Rosie tugged my hand. "He came. He really came." Before I could stop her, she was running toward him, yellow dress flying, and I watched with my heart in my throat as the Alpha King's face transformed. The grief smoothed away, replaced by something warm and genuine as Rosie skidded to a stop in front of him. "I brought you something," she announced, digging into her little backpack. She pulled out a drawing, crayon on construction paper, unmistakably her work. "It's you. See? You're smiling in it because I decided you should be happy today." Damien took the drawing with the kind of reverence usually reserved for holy relics. It was charmingly terrible, a stick figure with a crown and what might have been a smile, or possibly indigestion, surrounded by flowers and a lopsided sun. But he stared at it like she'd handed him the world. "This is the best gift anyone's ever given me," he said, and his voice cracked slightly. "Thank you, Rosie." "You're welcome. Now can you push me on the swings? Mama tries, but she's not very strong." "I'm perfectly strong," I protested, finally catching up to them. "You barely get me higher than the bushes," Rosie said with devastating honesty. "And last time you said your arms hurt after." Damien's mouth twitched. "I think I can do better than the bushes. Shall we?" The next hour was surreal. I watched the Alpha King, the wolf who commanded armies and ruled thousands, push my daughter on the swings with infinite patience, help her across the monkey bars, listen with absolute attention as she chattered about her teacher and her best friend Emma and the caterpillar she'd found that morning. Other parents stared, whispered, kept their distance. But Rosie treated him like any other adult who'd been recruited for play, and he seemed to bloom under her casual acceptance. "Higher!" she shrieked from the swing, and he obliged, his laughter mixing with hers. I sat on the bench he'd abandoned, watching them, and felt something dangerous taking root in my chest. This was how Marcus used to be with her. Playful, engaged, utterly devoted. I'd thought I'd never see that again. That Rosie would grow up without that kind of masculine presence, but here was this powerful, broken man, being gentle with my daughter, and it hurt in a way that felt like healing. "Your family's beautiful," I startled. A woman had sat down beside me, older, maybe late 50s, with kind eyes and silver threading through her dark hair. She smiled at my confusion. "Sorry, I didn't mean to intrude. I'm Grace Chen. My grandson's the one in the blue shirt over there." She gestured toward a boy Rosie's age. I had to say something. "That man, the way he looks at your daughter and you, that's something special. Hold on to it." "Oh, we're not," I started, then faltered. "What were we?" "It's complicated. The good things usually are." Grace patted my hand. "My husband died 12 years ago. Thought I was done with all that. Then I met someone at the community center. Your art class, actually. He volunteers in the wood shop. We're getting married next month." She laughed at my expression. "Life surprises you, honey. Let it." She left before I could respond, and I sat there turning her words over like stones, examining them from all angles. "Mama." Rosie's voice cut through my thoughts. "Mr. Damien says he has a garden with a fountain. Can we see it? Please? I looked up to find them both standing there. Rosie bouncing on her toes, Damien with his hands in his pockets, trying to look casual and failing because his eyes were fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin feel too tight. Only if your mama says yes, he told Rosie, but he was still looking at me. It's at the palace. There are peacocks. And the fountain has fish that Rosie might like. It was a test, I realized. An invitation to step further into his world, to let him deeper into ours. Please, Mama, Rosie wheedled. I've never seen a peacock in real life. I should have said no, should have kept this casual, maintained boundaries, protected us both from getting too attached too fast. But Grace's words echoed. Life surprises you, let it. And Damien was looking at me like I held something he needed, and I was so tired of being careful. Okay, I said, but just for an hour. Rosie cheered. Damien smiled, and it was like watching sunrise. The palace gardens were even more beautiful in daylight. We entered through a private gate, avoiding the formal areas, and suddenly we were in what felt like a secret world. Winding paths through rose arbors, ancient trees creating cathedral ceilings of green. And yes, peacocks strutting across manicured lawns like they owned the place. Rosie was enchanted, darting from one wonder to the next while Damien and I followed at a slower pace. Our hands brushed once, twice, and the third time his fingers caught mine. Held on. I should have pulled away. Didn't. I've been thinking about what you said, he murmured as we walked. About grief not working on schedules. You're right. But everyone expects me to have moved on by now. 6 months. That's the acceptable mourning period, apparently. After that, you're being self-indulgent. People are idiots, he laughed quietly. Yes, they are. His thumb traced circles on the back of my hand. Being with you and Rosie yesterday, today, it's the first time I've felt like I could breathe. Like maybe surviving isn't the same as drowning. My chest tightened. Damien, I know it's fast. I know this is insane. He stopped walking, turned to face me fully. But I'm not looking for her replacement. I'm not trying to fill a hole. I'm trying to figure out how to be alive again, and somehow you're showing me how. You and your impossible daughter who has no idea how extraordinary she is. She gets that from her father, I said, throat tight. I think she gets it from both of you. His free hand came up, cupped my face with a tenderness that made tears prick behind my eyes. I want to know you, Clara. Really know you. Your favorite color and what makes you laugh and all the small things that make you you. Is that okay? Can I have that? I thought about Marcus, about the promises I'd made. Live, he'd said. Don't let grief eat you alive. I'd spent 3 years existing, not living. Maybe it was time to remember the difference. Blue, I whispered. My favorite color is blue. Specifically the blue of the sky right before night falls, and I laugh at terrible puns. The worse, the better, and I'm terrified of thunderstorms, but I pretend I'm not because Rosie's afraid, and I need to be brave for her. His smile was worth every risk. I love terrible puns. I'm excellent at terrible puns. That might be a deal breaker. Too late. You're stuck with me now. The easiness of it, the gentle flirtation, felt like learning a language I'd forgotten. We kept walking, kept talking, and when we reached the fountain, an enormous marble structure with water cascading in musical patterns, Rosie squealed with delight at the golden koi drifting beneath the surface. They're magic, Damien told her seriously. Each one grants a wish, but only to people with kind hearts. Really? Rosie's eyes went huge. Really? Here. He pulled a coin from his pocket, pressed it into her palm. Make a wish and toss it in. I watched my daughter squeeze her eyes shut, her lips moving silently, then throw the coin with all her might. It plunked into the fountain, sinking past swimming koi, and Rosie turned to us with a satisfied nod. What did you wish for? I asked. Can't tell, or it won't come true. She looked between us with her 2 wise eyes. But I think it's already starting to work. That night, after we'd returned home and I'd tucked an exhausted Rosie into bed, I found her wish on a paper tucked under her pillow. She must have written it before throwing the coin, hedging her bets with the universe. I wish Mama would smile like she used to. I wish the king would stop being sad. I wish we could all be happy together. I sat on the edge of her bed, tears sliding hot down my face, and realized my daughter had been carrying the weight of my grief alongside her own. She'd been wishing me whole while I'd been too buried and lost to see her doing it. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but I knew who it was before I opened it. Thank you for today, for trusting me with your time, your daughter, your smiles. I haven't felt this human in months. Sleep well, Clara. Dream of blue skies and terrible puns. I saved the number. Typed back, thank you for reminding me what hope feels like. Good night, Damien. His response came immediately. Good night, sunshine. The nickname made me smile in the darkness. Made something warm spread through my chest. I fell asleep that night with my phone clutched in my hand and Rosie's wish burning bright behind my eyelids, a small prayer taking shape in the chambers of my slowly healing heart. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and careful courtship. Damien came to the community center, sat in on my art classes, charmed every child within radius by simply paying attention. We had coffee dates while Rosie was at school. Long conversations that ranged from philosophy to favorite books, to the strange politics of pack hierarchy. He was brilliant and funny and damaged in ways that mirrored my own brokenness. And I was falling. Slowly. Terrifyingly. Inevitably falling. The council's getting restless, he admitted one afternoon as we walked through the pack's market, Rosie running ahead to examine a stall selling ribbons. They think I need to choose a new Luna. Strengthen alliances, produce heirs, all the usual political nonsense. My stomach dropped. Oh, I've been ignoring them. He took my hand, raised it to his lips, pressed a kiss to my knuckles that made my breath catch. But they're right about one thing. I can't rule alone forever. The pack needs stability, needs family. He was looking at me like I was the answer to a question he hadn't yet asked, like we were standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying and wonderful. Damien, I started, fear and hope warring in my chest. I know, too fast, too soon. But Clara... He pulled me into a quiet alcove between stalls, cupped my face in both hands. I'm not good at slow. I'm not good at careful. When I know something's right, I know. And this, you, Rosie, us, this is right. I feel it in my bones. I'm scared, I confessed. So am I. Terrified, actually. His forehead touched mine, but I'm more scared of losing this. Of losing you. I closed my eyes, breathed him in. Snow and pine and something wild that called to the wolf I'd kept locked away for years. What are you asking me? Time, patience, a chance to prove I can be what you and Rosie need. He pulled back enough to meet my eyes. And maybe, eventually, if I'm very lucky and you'll have me, everything. Before I could respond, Rosie came barreling back, ribbons streaming from her hands, chattering about colors and her hair. And could Mama please braid them in tonight? The moment broke, but the promise hung between us, delicate and new. That night, I dreamed of white dresses and crowns made of flowers, of Rosie's laughter echoing through palace halls, of strong arms around me, and a voice whispering mine against my skin. I woke with tears on my face and Marcus's name on my lips, but this time the tears felt like goodbye, like permission, like love making space for new love, the way seasons make space for each other. Live, Marcus had begged. Please, just live. Maybe it was finally time to try. The attack came on a Tuesday, sudden and vicious as a knife between ribs. I was at the community center, halfway through teaching a watercolor lesson to a room full of enthusiastic 8-year-olds, when the alarm started screaming, not the fire alarm. Something deeper, more primal. The emergency broadcast system that meant one thing: threat to the pack. My wolf surged forward, instincts overriding 3 years of dormancy. Rosie. She was at school, 10 blocks away, and suddenly 10 blocks felt like 10,000 miles. Everyone stay calm, I told the children, forcing my voice steady even as panic clawed at my throat. We're going to go to the safe room now, just like we practiced. Remember? Single file, quiet voices, but the kids could smell my fear, could hear the commotion outside. Shouting, running footsteps, the unmistakable crack of something breaking. One of the younger girls started crying, and I scooped her up, balanced her on my hip while herding the others toward the reinforced room in the center's basement. My phone buzzed incessantly in my pocket. Messages flooding in. I didn't dare look. The safe room was already filling with people. Other teachers, parents who'd been nearby, elderly wolves from the senior center upstairs. Someone had a radio crackling with emergency broadcasts. Rogue wolves spotted at the eastern border. Multiple casualties. All civilians to shelter immediately. This is not a drill. Rogues. The word sent ice through my veins. Rogues were wolves who'd rejected pack law, who'd let their animals consume their humanity. They were unpredictable, violent, and they always attacked in groups. Rosie. I finally pulled out my phone with shaking hands, found 17 missed calls from the school, 6 from Mrs. Kowalski, 3 from Julian, and 1 from Damien. I called the school first. Mrs. Ashford, thank God. The principal's voice was strained. Rosie's fine. She's in our secure location with the other children. But we're on lockdown, and I can't release anyone until... I'm coming to get her. No, Clara, you can't. The streets aren't safe. There's fighting near the school district. You need to stay. I hung up. Called Damien. He answered before the first ring finished. Clara, where are you? Community center. Damien, Rosie's at school and they won't let me. I know. I'm already sending Julian with a security team to the school. They'll bring her to the palace. It's the safest place right now. His voice was commanding, alpha in every syllable, but underneath I could hear the fear. Stay where you are. Lock down. I'm coordinating the defense, but Clara, I need to know you're safe. Please. Tell me you'll stay put. Every instinct screamed at me to run toward my daughter. But I looked around the safe room, 23 people, 12 of them children, all looking to me for reassurance. I was one of the only adults here with any kind of training. If I left, I'd be abandoning them. Okay, I forced out. Okay, I'll stay, but Damien... I'll protect her with my life, he said fiercely. Both of you. I swear it. The line went dead. Around me, people were crying, praying, clutching each other. I set down the girl I'd been holding, moved to the radio, turned up the volume so we could track what was happening outside our concrete walls. The next 2 hours were the longest of my life. We listened to the broadcasts, to the updates that came in fragments. The rogues had breached the eastern defenses. They were pushing toward the residential areas. The King's Guard was engaging them in the market district. Casualties mounting. No numbers yet. Just the word casualties repeating like a drumbeat. I kept the children occupied, had them draw pictures, tell stories, anything to distract from the muffled sounds of violence filtering through the walls. But my phone stayed clutched in my hand, and every time it buzzed, I nearly jumped out of my skin. Finally, Julian's name flashed across the screen. She's safe. His voice was breathless, rough with exertion. I've got Rosie. We're at the palace. She's asking for you, but Clara, she's unharmed. Not a scratch. The relief nearly buckled my knees. Thank you. God, Julian, thank you. Don't thank me. Thank Damien. He pulled half the guard to secure the schools first. A pause. Sounds of shouting in the background. It's bad out here, Clara. The rogues are organized, equipped. This wasn't random. This was planned. What do you mean, planned? I mean someone sent them. Someone with resources and a grudge against Damien specifically. More shouting. Closer now. I have to go. Stay safe. We'll come for you when it's clear. He hung up before I could ask more questions. I stood there, phone pressed to my chest, trying to process. An organized attack targeting Damien. Why? Who would... The lights went out. In the sudden darkness, someone screamed. I fumbled for my phone's flashlight, clicked it on, saw 24 terrified faces reflected back at me. Everyone stay calm, I said, louder than necessary. It's just the power grid. We're safe here. The walls are reinforced, the door is steel. Nothing's getting through. But even as I said it, I heard something that made my blood freeze, scratching at the door. Not human hands. Claws. The children heard it too. The crying started again, escalating toward hysteria. I moved toward the door, positioned myself between it and the others. Felt my wolf rising with a ferocity that shocked me. I'd always been the weak one, the Omega, the wolf who'd barely passed her first shift. But now, with children behind me and threat ahead, I felt something ancient and fierce wake up in my bones. Get back, I told the other adults. Get everyone to the far corner, now. They obeyed, scrambling, and I was alone facing the door as the scratching intensified, as something heavy slammed against the steel, once, twice. The door held, but I could hear them on the other side, multiple wolves, snarling, working in coordination to get through. My phone rang. Damien. Don't go outside, he said before I could speak, voice ragged. Clara, whatever you hear, whatever happens, do not open that door. We're coming, but you need to hold on. The door buckled. Just slightly, but enough to let in a sliver of gray daylight, enough to see the shadow of something massive on the other side. Damien, they're breaking through. I heard him curse, heard him shouting orders to someone else. Then his voice came back, steady despite the chaos I could hear behind it. Listen to me. You're stronger than you think. Your wolf. She's protective, Clara. She'll fight for those children. Let her up. Let her help you. I'm not a fighter. I've never... You're a mother. That makes you the most dangerous thing in this room. His conviction was absolute. Trust yourself, and know that I'm coming. Hold on, Sunshine. Please. The door buckled again. Someone whimpered behind me. I looked down at my hands, watched them begin to shift, claws extending, fur rippling across my knuckles. My wolf was rising without my permission, dragged up by pure desperation. Protect the pack, she snarled in my head. Protect the young. The door gave way. 3 rogues poured through the gap. Massive wolves, their eyes empty of anything human. Their muzzles pulled back in snarls. Behind me, screaming. But I was already moving, letting my wolf take over, dropping to 4 legs as the shift tore through me faster than it ever had before. I was smaller than them, weaker. But I was fighting for 23 lives, and that made me vicious. I went for the first rogue's throat, my teeth finding purchase in matted fur and flesh. He howled, threw me off. But I'd bought seconds. The other adults were shifting now too, forming a barrier. But they were old, slow. The rogues would tear through them. Not today, my wolf growled. Not ever. I launched myself at the second rogue as he advanced on a cluster of children, caught his leg, felt bone crunch beneath my jaws. He turned on me, snapping, and I felt teeth sink into my shoulder, felt the hot rush of pain and blood. But I held on, dragged him away from the children, away from... The wall exploded inward. Not rogues this time. Guard wolves, massive and coordinated, with Julian at the head in his wolf form, a huge auburn beast with intelligent eyes. They hit the rogues like a tidal wave, and suddenly the fight shifted, the rogues going from predators to prey. I released the wolf I'd been holding, stumbled back, my shoulders screaming, shifted back to human because holding the wolf form hurt worse than anything. Blood was spreading across my shirt, warm and too fast. But the children were okay. Everyone was okay. We were... Clara! Julian was human again, crouching beside me, his hands pressing against my shoulder. Hold on. Medic's coming. You're going to be fine. The children, I managed through gritted teeth. Are they... all safe? You saved them. His eyes were fierce with something like pride. You incredible, crazy woman. You held off 3 rogues. I tried to laugh, but it came out as a cough. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving pain and exhaustion. Around me, people were being evacuated. Children reunited with parents. But everything was getting distant, fuzzy around the edges. Rosie, I whispered. Safe at the palace with Damien, asking for you constantly. Julian's hands were still pressed against my shoulder. But the blood kept coming. Stay with me, Clara. Don't you dare. The world tilted, dimmed. I heard shouting, felt myself being lifted, carried. Somewhere far away, I heard a sound like a wounded animal, a howl that echoed with grief and rage and desperate fear. Damien, I thought. Then darkness swallowed everything. I woke in a bed that wasn't mine, surrounded by the smell of antiseptic and something else, pine and snow and Damien. He was slumped in a chair beside the bed, his head in his hands, and when I stirred, he shot upright like I'd electrocuted him. Clara. My name broke on his tongue. He was beside me in an instant, his hands framing my face with infinite gentleness. You're awake. Thank God. You're awake. Rosie, I croaked. With Mrs. Kowalski in the next room. She's fine, completely fine. She drew you about 40 pictures while she waited. His thumb traced my cheekbone, his eyes tracking over me like he was cataloging every injury. You terrified me. When Julian called and said you'd been hurt, that you'd fought 3 rogues to protect those children, his voice cracked. I thought I'd lost you. I thought... Hey. I caught his hand, held it. I'm okay. I'm right here. You have 17 stitches in your shoulder. You lost enough blood that they had to give you a transfusion. The doctor said if the guard had arrived 5 minutes later, he couldn't finish, just pressed his forehead to mine, breathing hard. You're not allowed to scare me like that again. Ever. Pretty sure I didn't plan it. You saved those children. Every single one of them is alive because you were brave and fierce and... He pulled back, and I saw tears tracking down his face. And I love you. I'm in love with you, Clara Ashford. I know it's too soon. I know it's insane. But I fell in love with you in that garden, and I've been falling deeper every day since, and today when I thought I'd lose you. I kissed him. It was messy and desperate and tasted like tears. His or mine, I couldn't tell, but it was real, solid, an anchor in the chaos. When we finally broke apart, I was crying too. I love you. I whispered against his mouth. I'm terrified and this is too fast and I don't know how to do this, but I love you. His smile was incandescent. We'll figure it out. Together. We'll... The door burst open. Rosie stood there, Mrs. Kowalski behind her, and then my daughter was launching herself at the bed. At me, sobbing. Mama, you're okay. They said you were hurt. I was so scared. I'm okay, baby. I wrapped my good arm around her, pressed my face into her hair. I'm okay. We're all okay. Damien's hand found mine, squeezed, and lying there with my daughter in my arms and the man I loved beside me, I realized something fundamental had shifted. We'd been tested by fire and violence, and we'd survived. Together. This was no longer a maybe, no longer a careful courtship. This was family, forged in blood and fear and love. Recovery was slower than I wanted and faster than it should have been. The doctor, a stern woman named Dr. Reeves who'd served the pack for 40 years, kept me in the palace medical wing for 3 days, ignoring my protests about needing to get home, to get back to work, to resume normal life. Damien overruled every argument with the kind of alpha command that made even Dr. Reeves nod approvingly. You nearly died protecting pack members, he said on the second day, sitting beside my bed while Rosie napped in the corner, curled up like a kitten in an oversized armchair. You don't get to pretend that's nothing. You heal. Properly. Then we talk about normal life. I can't just stay here indefinitely. People will talk. Let them. His hand found mine, fingers interlacing. Clara, we need to discuss something. The council wants to meet you. My stomach dropped. Why? Because in the 3 weeks since we met, you've become important to me. And what's important to me becomes important to the pack. He hesitated, and I could see him choosing words carefully. They're concerned. About my attachment to someone who isn't established in pack hierarchy. About moving too fast after... He stopped, pain flickering across his face. After your mate died, I finished quietly. They think I'm taking advantage, or that you're not thinking clearly. They think I need time, that I'm replacing her instead of honoring her memory. His jaw tightened. They're wrong. But I need them to see that. I need them to meet you, to understand that this isn't some grief-induced mistake, that you're... He looked at me with such intensity I felt it like a physical touch. That you're real and right and exactly what I need. Fear and hope warred in my chest. When? When you're healed. When you're ready. He raised my hand to his lips. But Clara, you should know. They're going to test you. Question your intentions, your worthiness. It won't be easy. Nothing worth having ever is. I squeezed his hand. I can handle it. We can handle it. His smile was fierce and proud. Yes, we can. The meeting happened 2 weeks later, in the formal council chamber, a room designed to intimidate with its high ceilings, its ancient tapestries depicting pack history, its massive table where 12 council members sat like judges. I wore a simple navy dress, kept my hair loose, refused to apologize for being myself. Damien sat at the head of the table, and I stood beside him, feeling the weight of a dozen pairs of eyes measuring, assessing, finding me wanting. Clara Ashford. The woman who spoke was elderly, sharp-eyed, with silver hair braided in an elaborate crown. You understand why we've asked you here? To determine if I'm worthy of the Alpha King's attention, I said, keeping my voice steady. To make sure I'm not some opportunist taking advantage of his grief. A few council members looked surprised by my directness. The silver-haired woman, Council Elder Miriam, I'd learned, smiled slightly. Precisely. You were mated before. To Marcus Ashford, a mid-level warrior who died in a training accident. She said it clinically, like Marcus was a footnote. You have a daughter. You work at the community center teaching art to children, hardly a position of influence. No, I agreed. Just a position where I shape young minds and give children from struggling families a place to feel valued, nothing important. Another council member, a man with steel-gray hair and cold eyes, leaned forward. You've been widowed 3 years. In that time, you've shown no interest in seeking another mate. Yet within 3 weeks of meeting the king, you're positioned to become Luna. Curious timing. The accusation was clear. I felt Damien tense beside me, felt his wolf rise in defense, but I placed a hand on his arm. You're right, I said calmly. The timing is curious, almost like grief doesn't follow convenient schedules, almost like two people who've both lost everything might recognize something in each other that no one else can see. I met the cold-eyed man's gaze directly. I didn't seek the Alpha King out. My daughter found him crying in a garden and offered him comfort the only way a child knows how. What followed was two broken people learning to breathe again. If that's suspicious to you, then I suppose I'm guilty. You fought rogues. Miriam again, her tone shifting slightly, held them off long enough to save 23 lives, including 12 children. Dr. Reeves said your injuries should have been fatal. You shouldn't have been able to keep fighting. Yet you did. I'm a mother. My daughter was somewhere in the territory, potentially in danger. Every child in that room was someone's daughter, someone's son. I felt my wolf stir, remembered the clarity of that moment when instinct overrode fear. I did what anyone would do. Not anyone, another council member said, a younger woman with kind eyes. Most wolves would have frozen. You're classified as Omega-level strength. You shouldn't have been able to take on even one rogue, let alone 3. Strength isn't just physical. Damien spoke for the first time, his voice carrying alpha weight. Clara has something many of us lack, the courage to be vulnerable, to choose compassion when power would be easier. She's shown more leadership in one moment of crisis than some show in a lifetime of titles. With respect, Your Majesty, the cold-eyed man said, you're emotionally compromised. Your judgment regarding this woman is sound. Damien interrupted, his wolf bleeding into his voice, making everyone at the table flinch except Miriam and me, and not up for debate. I brought Clara here as a courtesy, to introduce her properly, not to have her worth questioned by people who've never had to rebuild their lives from ashes. The room went silent. Damien stood, pulled me up with him, his hand firm in mine. Clara Ashford is under my protection. She and her daughter are part of this pack, and I will tolerate no disrespect toward them. If any of you have concerns about my choices, you can bring them to me directly. Are we clear? It was a display of dominance, of alpha authority, and every wolf in the room felt it. Heads bowed in submission, even the cold-eyed man, though he did it grudgingly. Only Miriam remained unbowed, studying us with those sharp eyes. Finally, she spoke. The king is right. This meeting was inappropriate. She looked at me, and something in her expression softened. I lost my mate 40 years ago, child. Thought I'd never feel whole again, but life has a way of surprising us. Of healing wounds we thought were permanent. She stood, moved around the table until she stood before me. You have a warrior's heart in an Omega's body. That's a rare thing. Treasure it. And you, she turned to Damien. You found something precious. Don't let politics or propriety make you question it. The pack needs a Luna, yes. But more than that, it needs hope. These two, she gestured to us, they survived the unsurvivable and chose to love again. That's the kind of strength that builds kingdoms. She bowed slightly to both of us, then left the chamber. One by one, the other council members followed, until only the cold-eyed man remained. I still have reservations, he said stiffly. Noted, Councilman Reed. Damien's tone was icy. You're dismissed. When we were finally alone, I sagged against Damien, the adrenaline crash hitting hard. That was horrible, he finished. I'm sorry. Reed's been trying to push his daughter toward me for months. This was personal for him. He's not wrong to be cautious. I looked up at him. This is fast, Damien. 3 weeks ago, we didn't know each other. Now we're talking about me becoming Luna. I'm not talking about it. He cupped my face, his thumbs tracing my cheekbones. I'm certain of it. The question is whether you are. Was I? Could I really see myself as Luna Queen, standing beside this powerful man, helping him lead thousands of wolves? Me, the widow who taught art classes and could barely shift without pain. But then I remembered the rogues, remembered how my wolf had risen when she was needed most, remembered Rosie's wish in the fountain, Grace's words about letting life surprise me, Miriam's fierce approval. Maybe strength wasn't about being the biggest or the strongest. Maybe it was about showing up, about choosing love even when fear screamed to run. Yes, I whispered, I'm certain. His kiss was answer and promise, deep and claiming. When we broke apart, I was dizzy with it. With him, with the impossibility of this new life taking shape around us. There's something I need to show you, he said, taking my hand. He led me through the palace, upstairs and down corridors I'd never seen, until we reached a wing that smelled of fresh paint and sunshine. He opened a door, and I stepped into a room that stole my breath. It had been transformed into an art studio, massive windows flooding it with natural light, easels and canvases, paints and brushes, organized with meticulous care, and along one wall, a smaller space set up for a child, with a little easel and brightly colored supplies. For you, Damien said quietly, both of you. I thought, if you're going to live here, you need space that's yours, where you can create, where Rosie can make her masterpieces. I turned to him, tears streaming down my face. You did this for us? I'd do anything for you. I'd tear down walls and rebuild kingdoms if it meant seeing you smile. He pulled me close, and I buried my face in his chest, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was offering. When? I managed. Soon. When you're ready. But Clara, he tilted my chin up. I need you to know what you're agreeing to. Being Luna isn't easy. It's politics and public appearances and endless responsibility. You'd be giving up your privacy, your anonymity. People will scrutinize everything you do. I know. And I did. I wasn't naive enough to think this would be simple. But you'd also have me. Completely, forever. You'd be my mate, my queen, my partner in everything. His voice dropped to something raw and vulnerable. I can't promise it'll be easy, but I can promise I'll love you through every difficult moment. You and Rosie both. She adores you, I said, smiling through tears. She told Mrs. Kowalski you're her almost papa. His expression went soft, devastated in the best way. I'd be honored to be her father, if you'll let me. If she'll have me. I think that's a question you should ask her. We found Rosie in the gardens with Mrs. Kowalski, picking flowers and chattering about butterflies. When she saw us, she came running, yellow dress flying, and Damien caught her, swung her up into his arms like he'd been doing it forever. Rosie, he said seriously, I need to ask you something important. You know how much I care about your mama, right? She nodded. suddenly solemn. Well, I care about you just as much, and I was wondering if you'd let me be part of your family, not to replace your first papa, never that, but to be here, to love you and your mama, to keep you safe. Would that be okay? Rosie studied him with those wise hazel eyes. Then she threw her arms around his neck and squeezed. Does this mean we get to live in the palace? With the peacocks? Damien laughed, the sound pure joy. Yes, if your mama says yes. They both looked at me. Damien holding my daughter like she was precious, Rosie grinning with her whole face, and I felt the last piece of my broken heart slot back into place. Not the same as before, better. Stronger for having been shattered and rebuilt. Yes, I said, to all of it. Yes. The ceremony happened a month later, under a full moon in the palace gardens, traditional and intimate, with just close friends and family. Mrs. Kowalski crying in the front row, Julian standing as Damien's best man with pride written all over his face, Miriam officiating with a voice that carried centuries of pack wisdom. I wore simple white, with wildflowers in my hair. Rosie stood beside me in yellow, holding a bouquet almost as big as she was, beaming at everyone. When Damien took my hands, when he spoke the ancient words of pack bonding, I felt something fundamental shift in my chest, the mating bond snapping into place with an intensity that drove me to my knees. He caught me, held me, and I felt him too. All his grief and hope and fierce protective love pouring through the connection. I've got you, he whispered against my hair, always. The bond settled, warm and golden, and when I looked up at him, I saw my own wonder reflected back at me. You're mine now, he said, not as possession, but as reverence, and I'm yours. Forever. Forever, I agreed. When we kissed, the pack howled their approval, voices rising to join the moon, and somewhere in the sound, I heard Marcus too, not grief anymore, but blessing. Permission to live, to love, to be whole again. 6 months later, I stood in the palace ballroom at my first official function as Luna Queen, Rosie tucked against my side in her finest dress, watching Damien command the room with effortless authority. He caught my eye across the crowd, smiled, and I felt the bond pulse with warmth. We'd had challenges, council members who still doubted, pack members who resented the speed of our bonding, nights when old grief rose up and threatened to drown us both. But we'd faced them together, two people who knew what it meant to lose everything and chose each other anyway. Mama, Rosie whispered, tugging my hand. Are you happy? I looked down at my daughter, our daughter now, because Damien had formally adopted her last week, had given her his name and his protection and his whole heart. Then I looked across the room at my mate, my king, the man who'd found me in his darkest moment and somehow seen light. Yes, baby, I said, pulling her close. I'm very, very happy. And I was. Not because the pain had disappeared. Grief never truly leaves, just learns to coexist with joy. But because I'd learned that broken things can be beautiful, that endings can become beginnings, that sometimes the people who understand your darkness best are the ones who teach you how to find light again. Later that night, after Rosie was asleep and the guests had departed, Damien and I stood in our garden, the one where this had all begun. The roses were blooming again, jasmine climbing the walls, and somewhere in the darkness, I could hear the fountain's musical cascade. Do you ever think about that first night? I asked, leaning into his warmth. How Rosie just offered me up like a consolation prize? He laughed quietly. Best consolation prize I've ever received. His arms came around me, solid and sure. She saved me, you know. Both of you did. I was drowning, and she threw me a rope disguised as a 6-year-old's wisdom. She's 7 now. She'd correct you. She'd absolutely correct me. He pressed a kiss to my temple. I love you, Clara. I love our life, our family. I love that we found each other in the wreckage and built something beautiful. I turned in his arms, cupped his face, saw the man behind the king, scarred and healing and wholly mine. I love you too, I whispered. Thank you for teaching me how to hope again. Thank you for teaching me how to live. We stood there wrapped in each other as the moon rose higher, two souls who'd survived the unsurvivable, who'd chosen love when logic said to run, who'd built a kingdom not of power but of compassion, courage, and the stubborn belief that broken things deserve second chances. And somewhere in the palace, in a yellow bedroom filled with drawings and flowers and love, a little girl slept peacefully. Her wish from the fountain finally answered. We were happy. We were home.